there's this dissonance when you're trying to give commands where you're like, Boris Sedia, and they're like, what was that?
Hi, I'm Leah.
My name is Dylan.
I'm Nicholas.
Hi, I'm also Leah, and this is
ZULA ChickChats.
Okay, so hi guys, welcome to today's episode of ZULA ChickChats. And for everyone out there, we have 3 special guests on the episode today. And we'll be talking about international school culture and also like what it's like being an international student in Singapore. So my first question is actually, where did you guys live prior to living in Singapore?
Before Singapore, I lived in Kenya, like for the first 17 years of my life. And then I moved here when I was turning 18. And I've been here for 3 years.
How did you end up moving here?
Wanderlust, partly.
Why Wanderlust?
So I did look into a lot of opportunities earlier on as I was still going through the national system in Kenya. Applied to a couple of places and then I applied to UWC in general. How the process works is that for my committee, the committee that chose me, that selected the students getting into UWC, they choose which one you go to, so they chose Singapore for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I just knew I had to go somewhere. And then somewhere I ended up in here.
Okay, nice. Okay.
Okay, so I was born in Singapore. When I was 4, I moved to New Zealand, spent 10 years there, and then moved back and have been here ever since.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was actually born in New Zealand, but I wasn't there for very long. My family moved to Tokyo for 2 years, and then on to Sydney for another 4 years. After that, I've been in Singapore for the last 11 years.
For someone who has never been to an international school, myself, I would like to know like what the whole experience is like.
Have you seen Never Have I
that
Ever?
was the first thing
Yeah,
that came
I
to
feel
my
like
mind.
that's the most, okay, it's still exaggerated to a degree, but I feel like that's the closest approximation to what high school -- international school was like.
I've never related so much to American TV like I did with Never Have I Ever after experiencing the IB at UWC. Well, I've been through the national Kenyan school system and it's very different from the IB. The first thing that caught me like with the school culture at UWC was just how friendly everyone is. Like it was especially the staff. I was so confused. Like, what do you mean I'm doing okay? You actually do care that I'm doing okay? Okay, this is strange because I think there was a very hard line between teachers and students back in the school culture I was used to, and it was more like they were an authoritarian figure. So coming here, it was just like interesting seeing the dynamics between students and teachers.
But how about like the curriculum itself? Like how's the curriculum?
There are a lot of people who are very kind of willing to take it easy, I think you could say, but I think there are also, you know what I mean? Yeah, but there are a lot of people who take it really seriously as well, and I think, we had a lot of students coming from kind of cultural backgrounds where, academics were important, and I think, their parents had very high expectations. I did often as well, kind of going for tuition on the weekends, during holidays, and I think, that there was that sort of like, implicit pressure with your peers to kind of keep up, and I think that really came to a head when it came to like your GCSE exams, your IB exams.
It's not so much also about success, but the repercussions of failure aren't there. So for example, say I do really, really badly in my end of year level exam, like the equivalent to PSLE.
Okay.
It's not going to have a huge detriment on my schooling in the next few years. It's not going to like determine the schools that I can go into. Chances are I would still be able to get into the same kinds of schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of how strict your school is.
In terms of uniform, it's luck of the draw.
Okay.
Like if you're walking down the corridor and the teacher just happens to notice that your skirt is slightly lower, that your hair is a funky color, or you're wearing a wristband, then you're gonna get like a talking to.
Okay.
You're not gonna get like detention or anything.
Sorry, they're getting a talking to. I'm just like, I'm just like
Next time.
It's like for us, it's just like you're getting scolded, not even getting talked to. Yeah.
Like makeup was allowed. There was not too many restrictions as far as I heard in terms of like hair and stuff like that. Yeah.
They generally sort of treated you as adults, so like,
Okay.
we called it, our teachers by their first names. I think we had.
Wait.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, no, it was a very
Sorry,
like.
I would never.
Unacceptable.
Yeah,
like,
no.
if I call my teacher, or something, they would be like. So
No, we
so
we
wild.
joke around.
Morning,
like,
Sarah.
no, it was like, hey Tim, what's up? And it
No,
was like,
that's weird. Oh
Unacceptable.
my
I'm
god.
sorry.
Yeah.
Please realize how viscerally uncomfortable I am.
No, and that's why, like, to me now it sounds quite insignificant, but actually it was quite a big thing to adjust to.
Then I guess my next question, we talked a bit about like the curriculum and like how the whole the school structure is. How about like social circle wise? Like are most of your friends from your schools, or like do you mix with like people outside of your school?
Okay, my group of friends were international students.
Okay.
There weren't those opportunities to have strong friendships outside of the people that I went to school with.
Same as Dylan, like my social circle started and ended at UWC. It was just very natural, and you kind of had this sense that there was nothing more out there, which was very delusional. Like, it's so insane. I felt like I was living in Singapore at the start of last year when I actually got into Yale US.
Okay.
Like I was just introduced to actual Singapore because of the interactions I was able to have with local students. Just even picking up on just the tiny things like Singlish, the kind of food they like. I don't know how they set it up is that you have no option but to interact with each other. Honestly, on the whole, our interactions have added a lot of value to my perspective and how I view life. Yeah.
I think that kind of like leads into the next question, which I was gonna ask all of you, which is like when was like the first initial culture shock?
BMT.
Yeah, okay, share.
BMT.
I'm curious.
And that was such a big shock for me because it's like, oh yeah, I have to call you sir now.
Oh,
Like,
Oh, you would have
That
gotten
was
you.
like
Did you
shit.
mess up?
oh, a lot. Yeah. I didn't know what a sergeant major was for like the first month.
There's this dissonance when you're trying to give commands where you're like, Boris Sadia, and they're like, what was that? They're like, what was my sergeant
I
on your
remember,
side? I was
actually-
like, you need to stop messing this up. Like the way you're saying these are just the worst.
As a punishment for falling in late, my sergeant made me do the commands from like the cookhouse back to the bunks, and I had to do the whole thing, and it was just like, it was like a stand-up set or something.
Yeah, because it does come off.
It
It
comes
comes
off-
off
it's like
weird. So very early on, they're like, you can pick up some Singlish in this time. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'd be like, yeah, that's right, Sia. And they'd be like, what was say? Can you not emphasize it so much? I'm like, it sounds fine in my head. You would sign your name upstairs, and then you would walk down this spiral staircase that is kind of overlooking the canteen. So as I would walk down, I would see everyone, and I'd be like, oh, morning, everyone. And they would look up and be like, good morning, Dylan. Good morning. Good morning. And then I found out Nicholas was coming to my unit, and I was like, finally, there's someone with a stronger accent than me. They'll finally
You took the
realize.
hit for me.
Yeah, they'll
like,
finally realize that mine is actually not that extreme.
yours
And
is
then
fun. Yeah.
Nicholas came in, and they were like, no, we're just gonna make fun of both of you now.
Split the load.
How about for you, dear?
Recently, I dropped my MRT card, and where was I? I was in gym. I was walking outside,
Yeah.
and someone tapped my shoulder to give it to me. But my stance was like, okay, I'm ready to like knock your chin if you
Deep your face.
That's the survival tactic I had to adopt back at home. It's like now it's just automatic response. And then they handed me my MRT card, and I was like, this is so bizarre. Like, thank you for giving it to me, but I'm sorry I almost jumped at you, but thank you.
But maybe what are some kind of stereotypes of international students or maybe expats in Singapore that you guys know of that maybe you want to clarify that are like wrong, or you want to clarify that like are completely true?
Just before we had this interview, I asked some of my local student friends who came from local schools here what some of their misconceptions about students from UWC were, and their thoughts were exactly the same: rowdy entitlement. So it's like everyone otherizes the other, so it's just it's strange.
So it's like something that might seem very normal in like New Zealand. If you do it in Singapore, people will be a bit like, that was weird and
Or rude
Extreme.
or whatever.
Yeah.
No, but I
like that's
also
a bit like unacceptable.
Right.
My younger brother, he's 4 years younger than me, so he's still in the Australian school.
okay.
He'll be like, yeah, we go to the cinema and like we're like laughing, and like, someone's bought like a box of cereal, and I'm like, That sounds terrible. If I was in that cinema, I would be so angry with you.
Yeah.
You know, like this kind of tone deafness for the situation, or like not being aware of what the, but in fairness they are very young. But at the same time, no, unacceptable.
I actually think no. I don't think it's just like youth. I think it's also just like entitlement. I think generally just much rowdier, much more entitled to like space. I think
maybe people are influenced by like Western media or anything, right? And they assume people of like international culture are very like party goers. Is this something that is prominent? Or is it all a misconception?
It's fair. It's probably not like, I mean, I think some people are imagining like absolutely wild, like the Wolf of Wall Street or whatever, like sort of like glam, like kind of party lifestyles. And I don't think it's really like that either.
Okay.
Like I think it's the drinking culture here isn't. If anything, probably.
I would be really worried if it looked like Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay, so actually, I've got a funny story there. So this is again allegedly.
Okay.
So I had a very well-off friend, and for her 18th birthday, she had male strippers at the party wearing like gold, like
Not so bad.
Wait, sorry, what?
But it was like
Not that far out.
maybe not for you,
18.
Dylan.
18 is a bit.
They're like champagne, there was all that jazz.
Okay, now
you know.
yeah, okay. The champagne shocks me more.
It was very like Hollywood style.
Oh
But like
my
that's the exception, right?
Oh, that's
You
the
know.
exception.
But
Like,
you know what's interesting?
what?
I think we were only allowed these freedoms because we're in Singapore. The reason why like these teenagers are allowed to go out at night is because the parents have the knowledge that they're going to be okay coming
it's
home
safe.
at 3, 4
It's
a.m.
safe, yeah.
because it's safe.
Oh.
If we were in like New Zealand or Australia, there's absolutely
hell no.
no way that would
Yeah,
happen.
like a 14-year-old is gonna be
No,
Yeah.
I think that's interesting to say that, because they're in Singapore, they're allowed to
Yeah.
go out and do all these things. Because I would have never thought of it to be that way. Yeah.
Singapore is
Yeah.
so safe, it's crazy.
I think maybe you guys can give any like final like conclusive statements, anything you want to address to the audience.
All I'm gonna say is I think most of what Singaporeans believe is probably correct. Like
Okay.
with like a lot of asterisks.
Okay. Yeah, understand.
I guess at the end of the day, like these things are probably and I think this applies for kind of like both sides of this, things are always more nuanced than like what you expect and what you see, and I think I guess just bearing that in mind, when thinking about these issues.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much like what Nicholas said. In an attempt to try and simplify how we're going to consume whatever's happening around us, there is first the individual experience. Pretty much like the alcohol thing, like my family is really staunch Christian, so like before you see me as a Christian, I guess you'd first see me as an African, maybe an international, an expat in Singapore. But you see there's that other thing that makes and all these things are interconnected and they'll contribute towards my one individual experience. So everything is super, super nuanced.
Yeah. So today we talked a bit about international school culture as well as what it's like living as an expat in Singapore. And we cleared up some misconceptions, maybe talked a bit about some stereotypes. So if you guys have any questions or any comments about the topic, leave them down below and also let us know what else to talk about next time. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Bye bye!
Bye.